The Laemiska Pirates. Chapter 2. The Laemiska System. Almost everyone on the bridge turned as the main doors hissed open. There was a collective gasp on the aether. Velsavas could feel eyes swiveling to him as Yamasa came onto the bridge, trailed by her sec-first, Trisola, and her camera wrangler, a Venex named Chabak. All three wore ship suits, though Yamasa's was heavily tailored so that it accentuated more than hid her youthful and gentle curves. Both females' long hair was already bound up against the backs of their heads, as per regulation. One part of his mind wondered if the sword she wore was real or just decoration. The Venex was also wearing his ever-present camera rig. Velsavas could feel his lips tightening as he rose. He glanced at the emergence countdown, hoping he actually had more time than he knew he had left. But no, definitely not enough time to send the other two back. With a sigh that he was certain only a few of his bridge crew heard, he approached the three, signaling Boswick to join him. "Honored Severian Yamasa, I'm afraid you misunderstood my invitation. It was for you alone." As she opened her mouth to reply, he continued, "However, I must congratulate you on the foresight in bringing along your sea-rang. I don't think anyone has caught on stream the expression of someone seeing the Laemiska system for the first time before." Yamaska's whisker-thin eyebrows furrowed as she tried to decide if that was the compliment it sounded like, then decided it didn't matter. "Thank you, Rogue Captain Velsavas," she responded with a graceful bow. "Where would you like us to stand?" He could actually feel the air move as his entire bridge blinked in surprise at the question, but he merely smiled. "Unfortunately, that is an area that the streams get wrong so often. Everyone must be seated and strapped in. While the chances of a grav wave strong enough to cause problems passing through the bridge are minimal, they do still exist, and distracting me while I am doing the transit would not be advantageous." He turned and gestured to the secondary command chair. "If you like, Severian Yamasa, I thought you could take the alt-pilot station. That will put you close to the Commander Boswick, and he can answer any questions you have. And I think Sailor Tersola could take the Navsek's chair as he is in the ready stasis. And Mellar Chabak, why don't you take TAC-Sec?" Yamasa hadn't waited for him to finish speaking, moving to the indicated station. Transferring her sword and scabbard to the locking clamps on the side, she slid into it. As she buckled herself in, she actually started to look like she belonged, but then her hands reached for the controls, lightly brushing them in unbridled reverence. "Thank you, Rogue Velsavas. This is so baltish," she said it with a giggle. Her fingers toggled a switch and set off a beeping on her panel. Panicked, she looked around. "What did I hit? Are we firing weapons?" Velsavas chuckled good-naturedly as he leaned over and flicked the switch back down, quieting the beeping. "No, it's just letting you know that your controls aren't live. You're used to being in the captain's chair in your streams. It is always primary, so it doesn't have those alerts." He patted her reassuringly on the shoulder as he leaned back. "But Commander Boswick will have to take it over from here. I need to get seated and into the aether in preparation." Her attention, though, was back on the readers, her fingers sliding along screens to bring up more information. "Thank you, Rogue Velsavas," she said almost absentmindedly. Velsavas and Boswick exchanged eye rolls as the former moved to his station and slid into it. Buckling in quickly, he ran through some updates on his repeaters and reclined his chair back. In moments, he was deep in the aether, his fingers resting lightly on the controls. There was silence for several minutes, other than the gleeful sounds coming from Yamasa as she worked through all the information channels on her repeaters. Then the Marinate Nava spoke up, surprising the civilians. 5 minutes to emergence point." "Affirmative, Gilvez." A flick of the captain's fingers sent his voice to the ship as a whole. "Attention! Final to transit. All stations secure." Yamasa took several deep breaths to calm her excitement. "So what makes this transit so dangerous?" she asked to cover her nervousness. "It's the 4 stars in the system, Severian," Boswick responded from his station. "It's not just a matter of them having a chaotic influence on the aether in the area, throwing off massive and unpredictable grav and other waves. It's all the debris that is in mad orbits around them. One can never be sure any given area will be clear at any given time. Rogue Velsavas must reach through the veil and determine that our area is clear of all that." "Ah, I see." The young Devane trailed her fingers along the actual controls again, more gently this time, but with desire pouring from her. "My mother served on a ship once. She used to tell me that riding a rough transit was like power sled down an avalanche. If done right, smooth and exciting. If done wrong, short and deadly." There was silence for several minutes. Then Velsavas cracked out. "Launch veil hooks in 3, 2, 1, launch! The eyes of the two civilian Devane snapped to the main screen, filled with the colors, not colors, of Transpace. It was impossible to tell where the Venix was looking, as he had his hood deployed to watch feeds from his cameras. He had one point at Yamasa, one at Tresola, one on the screen, and one at Velsavis. On the screen, they could see the hooks spiraling out. With a snap, they stopped and latched. The ever-present hum of the ship increased slowly as the hooks started pulling back. Suddenly, there was a wavering point of black that quickly expanded, filling most of the screen. Distant stars could soon be made out in its expanse. The ship continued to slowly slide forward. The edge between Transpace and real space grew closer quickly. An edge that roiled with colors that bent the mind trying to identify them, or even answer the question if they were even there, much less where the billowing line actually was. As the nose of the ship passed through the opening, the camera switched to looking back as the roiling edge worked its way down the length of the ship. Soon it was slipping gently off the back of the slip onto the Orica tail. The ship slowed even more as the ring of distorted reality shrank around the tail. Then that too slipped out, letting the hole ripple shut gently. Velsavis's hand flicked the comms on. Transit complete. Bring out ready stations. He stole a look at the faces of the two Devane, staring intently at the screen as the view went forward again. Nav, how did that look? C to transit, -4. Orica tail, 20%. Very nice, wrote Velsavis. Javez responded, clearly impressed. Thank you. My compliments to you and the crew. Excellent job. Secure from transit stations and have our guests roused. As the crew started murmuring into their comms, he began tapping commands into his repeater stations. Now, shall we take a look? Retract main screen. Open armor. The screen rose, revealing a large portal. As they watched, the heavy armor started lifting, revealing a real view of the distant stars. When he had first seen this when he took this job, he had cringed. On survey, much less war ships, there was only armor between the bridge and space. The idea of having an actual window was insane. But this was a civilian luxury cruise ship. It was never meant to see combat. So this extravagance was acceptable, and it allowed for moments like this. His fingers twitched on the controls, and the view shifted, rolling to the left as he brought the ship to the right. His face drew into an honest grin as the first streamers of light came into view. The gasps from Yamasa and Tresola rewarded his showmanship. Descriptions of the system, and even the best dream recordings, were candles to the centers of stars, much less 4 of them. The streams of light that were first seen were the trails pulled from each of the 3 different colored stars as they wove their mad elliptical dances around the 4th, mostly dark, neutron star. Usually at this distance, the neutron star would be invisible as it was tiny in comparison and shed no light. But the bands of bright gases, some still burning, being pulled from the other stars and cascading down the steep gravity well, were falling onto its surface in splashes of light. As they rapidly approached, they could actually see the movement of the 3 stars, an impressive clue as to how fast the stars were moving along in possibly precise paths, always far enough from each other not to pull them together, but obviously just barely, as the streams of plasma drawn from them didn't always land on just the neutron star in the middle. Oh my God, Yamasa and Tresola exclaimed together. When Vilsavis looked down at them, he saw tears streaming down both their faces. He gave a paternal smile and nod. He would readily admit that his face was the same the first time he saw the system, and he would call anyone a liar who said the live view didn't cause the same to them. How does it stay that way? How did they not hit each other? Yamasa finally got out. That is one of the last great mysteries of the universe, Boswick rumbled, which points to the biggest mystery. No scientist believes that the Devane were the first race to achieve spaceflight, much less the first civilization. The galaxy, to say nothing of the universe, has been around far too long, but we have never found any evidence of them anywhere. It looks like they cleared up every traces of themselves before they left. Except this. There is no conceivable way for this to have occurred naturally, even for a few years. And these have been around for at least tens of millions of years. It can only be an example of their work. But how? Tresola spoke up for the first time. I was not aware of any technology that could move suns. You would be correct, Sela Tresola, Boswick responded warmly. We don't have any. We don't even have the power to move a mass the size of even the red dwarf, to say nothing of that massive neutron star. But I thought reactors could be made any size. She briefly turned to look at the Venex commander, but the view drew her eyes back quickly. I've seen the one they use on the Batmoon Wayne. Just make one bigger. A light chuckle spread in the room, sounding somehow odd and comforting coming from so many different races' throats. The size needed to move something as massive as that would likely collapse down and form its own small sun, he responded with a light tone in his voice, trying carefully not to sound condescending. What if they are ships? Imasa's voice was small with wonder at the idea and drew the attention of everyone on the bridge. What if they are the last ships of a people whose empire was dying but want to preserve as much as possible? But what they wanted to preserve was so massive it took 3 stars to contain them. Boswick's eyes sought the captain's, begging him to find an answer that didn't make the young actor seem like a fool. Vilsavis suppressed a sigh before answering. And the neutron star? Its mass crushes any matter that gets onto its surface completely flat. He watched as she chewed her lower lip in thought, her eyes never leaving the view that was rapidly growing closer. Then she brightened. It was already there. It is those ships' anchor. The aliens needed some way to keep all 3 massive ships together without destroying each other, and so they set them around a neutron star. Belsavis opened his mouth to respond, but realized he couldn't figure out a way to point out all the holes in her theory without sounding like he was making fun of her. Luckily, he was saved from having to when the door to the bridge ready chamber opened and the full bridge crew filed out. Tresola and Chabak quickly released their straps at the taps on their shoulders, standing and looking around confused for a moment. Then the Sea-Rang moved to stand in the back of the bridge, while Tresola stepped just behind her patron, eyes quickly returning to the swirling view of colors streaming in front of the massive portal. However, Yamasa didn't want to let him off the hook. Turning to him, she raised one elegant eyebrow, her pose challenging yet almost seductive at the same time. Well, could they be alien ships? Again, all eyes were on the captain, making him wish he were back on a combat ship facing an Eastline claimer. Or 10. Instead, he smiled. Unfortunately, I do not yet have the education necessary to evaluate adequately the fascinating possibility you rise. Perhaps when we get back to Vestok Station, someone there will be able to answer that for you. Her face took on an eager look, making him look even younger. You're bringing us in closer, correct? We could scan them. Belsavis' eyes grew strained. Unfortunately, the ship is not outfitted as a science ship. All of my crew is going to be very busy during our pass to ensure everyone is safe and enjoys the view. His attempt to remind her that while she was the most prominent guest on this cruise, she wasn't the only one failed to make impression. If anything, she seemed to get more eager as she drew herself straighter and her voice again took on the mannerisms of the part she had played, slow and metered. That is not an issue. With your kind permission, I will remain and make use of the sensor feeds I can access from this station. Her hand reached out and grasped her Sekfurst's. Tresola can aid me as she has even more training than I do. Belsavis's first inclination was to decline the request, and the sexy pouting look Yamasa took on did little to change his mind on it. However, he realized that as long as she was in that seat, running scans, she wouldn't be moving around his ship, getting into places she shouldn't be, and causing trouble. He inclined his head. Very well, but under these conditions. You must agree to remain here until we have fully passed through the rings, and you must keep your harnesses secure. Yamasa's head looked like it would snap off, so vigorously she nodded. Of course, my Ro. She spun back into her seat and started restrapping, but paused and looked back. Oh, but where may Tresola sit? Her eyes darted around the bridge. Boswick gestured to a station next to his. She can sit here if Ro Vesalvis is okay with that. I have all but the sensor controls cut out. Vesalvis again nodded. Very well. He couldn't help but smile at the eagerness of the two as they started bringing up information and plots on their stations. Then he felt a confused buzz from behind him. Singing to the first level of the Venex Sea-Rang's mind, he whispered to him. The straps are to encourage them to stay in one location, and they too tend to accentuate their forms. Wouldn't you agree? He felt Chabak's surprise at the direct contact, but the Venex recovered quickly. Agreed, wrote Valsavas, and thank you, he responded. But if things do get rough? Use the station you are at. It is typically empty, the captain responded. Again, thank you. Chabak's reply implied thanks for much more than just what was said. Valsavas sang a final wink of understanding before turning his attention back to the bridge. His remote showed everything working and running smoothly. In all truth, his presence during this was superfluous. His crew on their worst day could likely handle it better than he could on his best right now. The system had been moving in the exact same pattern for millions of years, and he was actually the newest member of the bridge crew. He'd only been on this cruise line for 4 trips. Most of the crew had done it dozens of times. He suppressed a chuckle at his use of that word. He had not gotten up the nerve to use it in the few high court events he had been invited to, but perhaps next time. His thoughts were interrupted by the nav alarm blaring. His eyes snapped down to his repeaters as his hands rose to engage controls. Nav, report.